Well, before they have a chance to kill us, or we have a chance to kill them, it looks like the Shias and the Sunnis may kill each other. It's the deadliest, most brutal region in the world, and now it faces a new threat. The Shia Muslims of Iran against the Sunni Muslims of ISIS.
Well, while they hate each other, these two kingpins of terror share common enemies. And as Eric Stakelbeck reports, that has major implications for America and her allies in the region.
One side leads chants of death to America and calls the United States the Great Satan. The other beheads American journalists and calls on Muslims to attack the U.S. homeland. Iran's leaders and ISIS have much in common: hatred for Israel and the West, and a desire to spread extremist Islam worldwide top the list. Yet Iran and its proxy Hezbollah are now fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. It's the main battleground in a growing war for regional supremacy between Sunni and Shia jihadists.
If you look at the Middle East today, you could be excused for being really confused, because we have Sunni jihadis on one side who don't like the West, but are also fighting Shia jihadis on the other side who also don't like the West, but they really don't like each other.
The Washington Institute's Matthew Levitt has worked as an analyst for the FBI and the Department of Treasury.
The Shia and the Sunnis now are very much at loggerheads, and they may share hatred of Israel. They may share hatred of the West, certainly suspicion of the West, but this sectarianism is the dominant issue right now.
The main battleground right now for this intra-Islam conflict is Syria. On the Sunni side, there are ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist groups. These groups, who've also been known to battle each other, have been supported to varying degrees by Sunni governments in the region, like Turkey and Saudi Arabia. On the Shia side are Iran and its proxy Hezbollah, both of whom are propping up the regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. This Sunni-Shia conflict is also raging in Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. Levitt says the nuclear deal recently struck by the Obama administration with Iran has only heightened tensions.
People in the region are also very concerned about an Iran deal, which appears to some to be embracing and legitimizing the Islamic Republic of Iran, despite its ongoing acts of terrorism and support for terrorism and its adventurism in the Middle East.
Sunni Muslims comprise roughly 85% of the world's Muslim population, while Shiites make up only about 15%. The two sides split in the 7th century because they disagreed over who should succeed Islam's prophet Muhammad. Shias felt it should be someone from Muhammad's direct bloodline. Sunnis disagreed. They have frequently been in conflict ever since and differ in certain areas in their interpretation of Islam. The hostility can run deep. Sunni ISIS, for example, considers all Shiites apostates who must be killed. Yet Middle East expert Elliot Chodoff says the reason for the current conflict runs deeper than religious differences. He notes that Shiite Iran has supported Sunni terrorist groups against Israel and the West.
Why are ISIS and Iran fighting each other? Because, look, they both hate America. They're both jihadist entities. Why are they fighting each other?
The simple answer is power.
Chodoff told CBN News that Iran and ISIS both want to dominate the region and are standing in each other's way.
In many ways, it's classical fascism. These are fascist either regimes or organizations.
An interesting byproduct of ISIS's rise and Iran's march to nuclear weapons is the growing relationship between Israel and its Arab neighbors in Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia.
They're working very, very closely with the Israelis because they have shared interests and shared concerns about the jihadis on both sides of this conflict.
It's a concern shared by the United States, which continues to be the main target for jihadists of all stripes. Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Well, that's going to be the major story, ladies and gentlemen. But, Terry, you know, I grew up in a little town called Lexington, Virginia. Up the road or down the road south of us was a town called Roanoke, Virginia. And the big radio station in Roanoke was WDBJ. You remember the days when the big Clear Channel AM stations, they had farm reports, they had soap operas, they had music, they had everything. Well, WDBJ was a station like that. Okay, well, they now have a TV station, and there was a tragedy that took place down there as one of the very lovely news reporters was shot down by a disgruntled former employee. And we'll tell you more about that, but I just want you to know that was hometown for me. That's just up the road, and I grew up listening to WDBJ.
Yeah.
Terry.
It's still, even though it's grown, a quiet area in Virginia. And up next, we're going to take a look at the aftermath of that terrible tragedy in Roanoke that happened yesterday. Plus, we have the rest of today's headline news. It's all coming up right after this, so stay with us.
The Virginia community of Roanoke is mourning and praying today after the shocking shooting of a reporter and her cameraman on live TV Wednesday, a murder committed by a former co-worker at their station. Ephraim Graham has the story.
Memorials and prayer vigils covered this Virginia community as investigators search for clues and answers at the home of the accused gunman, Vester Flanagan, who was known on air as Bryce Williams. WDBJ reporter Allison Parker and news photographer Adam Ward were in the middle of an interview when police say Flanagan, their former colleague, opened fire. The woman they were interviewing, Vicki Gardner, was shot and seriously injured.
It did not register that it was gunshots. It probably should have, but, you know, she's doing a little feature story.
Parker and Ward were killed. Ward was engaged to marry a producer at his station. 24-year-old Parker was dating WDBJ anchor Chris Hurst, and they were also planning to get married.
I lost the love of my life, and it was not slow, but it was incredibly painful, and it was immediate.
Police captured Flanagan after a crash, but he later died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
At some point in his life, it would appear things were spiraling out of control.
Flanagan was fired from WDBJ 2 years ago and a station in Florida in 2000. In both cases, he said he was wrongfully terminated, blaming racial attacks on him and saying he faced harassment for being gay. And he singled out Parker and Ward as well, but employees at his station say his charges are false. He sent a manifesto to ABC News where he pointed to the Charleston church shooting as what set him off, writing that he was a human powder keg.
Consistently with every one of these shooters is they believe that what is wrong in their life is our fault.
But Flanagan's rage nonetheless claimed its victims in a terrible tragedy that shocked the nation. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Pat, just a shocking and senseless tragedy.
Well, it is. You know, the manager of that station down there, I sympathize with him because I know what it's like. You have an employee, you don't even know anything about his orientation one way or the other, but he's a troublemaker and he's malcontent and he's not doing his job properly, and after several warnings, the manager is forced to let him go. Well, what happens? Well, there's a lawsuit that says, well, there's the sexual discrimination because he was a closet gay, or he was African American, or he was Indian, or he was some other minority. And then you, the station has a big lawsuit, and all of the ACLU comes jumping in, and it's just a nightmare. So the tendency is to leave these guys on the staff regardless of their problems, and before long you have somebody that is shot, like up in Virginia Tech. Excuse me. The shooter there that could not be identified because of federal law that said you cannot reveal the mental condition of somebody, and therefore he was allowed to continue to go on a rampage of shooting. It has nothing to do with guns. It's not a gun problem. It is a mental illness problem, and it is a law problem inflicted on us by the United States government. But that, we grieve with that beautiful girl and her cameraman, who were just senselessly murdered by that mentally deranged person who should probably have been institutionalized. John?
That's right. We hold them in our hearts and our thoughts and prayers. Congress has just 3 weeks left to decide the fate of President Obama's controversial nuclear deal with Iran. After weeks of intense lobbying, the White House appears closer to getting the plan past Congress, despite polls that show a majority of Americans are against it. And now nearly 200 former military leaders have come out against the agreement as well. George Thomas has that story.
With Congress set to vote on Iran's nuclear deal next month,
the Iran nuclear deal, good deal or bad deal?
Both sides are making last-minute pitches for and against the agreement. The latest, nearly 200 retired U.S. generals and admirals from every branch of service have written to Congress, urging lawmakers to reject the deal. The letter warns that the agreement will enable Iran to become far more dangerous, render the Mideast still more unstable, and introduce new threats to American interests as well as our allies. One of those key allies, Israel, got a warning from a senior Iranian official this week. Hussein Sheikh-Oslam, a foreign affairs advisor, said he rejects the existence of any Israeli on this earth, and added, "Our positions against the usurper Zionist regime have not changed at all. Israel should be annihilated, and this is our ultimate slogan." The Iran deal is meant to prevent the Islamic regime from building a nuclear weapon, but critics say it's not going to work. Despite serious opposition to the deal, it appears President Obama is closer to getting the votes needed to pass it through Congress. So far, 29 Senate Democrats have backed the deal. 2 are against it. 15 are still undecided. Supporters need 34 votes to uphold a presidential veto. A key Republican admits the president's aggressive campaign is paying off. "I don't think there's any question, but the lobbying effort by the administration certainly has generated results," Bob Cork of Tennessee told the Associated Press. But while supporters feel momentum on Capitol Hill, most Americans are against the nuclear agreement. Voters in the swing states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida fear the deal will make the world less safe. George Thomas, CBN News.
George, Pat, back to you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, one more sign of the misguided ideology of our president. This Iranian regime has been responsible for the wanton slaughter of more people than probably any other regime in the modern world. They have killed American troops. They have killed Allied troops. And it is state-sponsored terrorism. So what do? We legitimize that regime in the hotly contested struggle between the Sunnis and the Shias. We, the United States, are tilting on the side of the Shias, despite the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are Sunni. How's that going to help us in the Middle East? It's going to hurt us desperately. And now we're going to see an arms race because the Saudis are not going to sit idly by and let the Iranians get a nuclear bomb and then blow them up. So they're going to go for nuclear weapons. So the Pakistanis already have them, and now the Kuwaitis and others in the Middle East are going to ask for nukes, and then the Indonesians are going to ask for nukes, and the next thing you know, we're going to have the tipping point of a ghastly global conflict. And it's all brought about because of the feckless gentleman who now sits in the highest office of the world. John?
Pat, another global sigh of relief today for investors as Asian stocks rebounded after the Dow shot up by more than 600 points Wednesday. China's Shanghai Composite Index also made a big rebound today, rising more than 5% for its biggest one-day gain in 8 weeks. The good news follows 6 straight days of losses on Wall Street and weeks of decline in China. But experts warn more volatility could be ahead. The markets are still sorting out concerns about China's slowing economy and whether the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates. And the markets could get a boost from a new government report out today showing that the economy grew at a strong annual rate of 3.7% in the April to June quarter this year, much higher than originally estimated. Well, the late Jack Kemp was a conservative Republican who dove into the inner city in the 1980s and 90s. He showed conservative ideas and programs could help end poverty and not just maintain the status quo and pay trillions in welfare. As Paul Strand reports, some say the GOP needs to champion these programs again to show what works to help the poor.
Conservative ideas and values are conquering inner-city poverty, crime, and addictions at places like the House of Help City of Hope project in one of D.C.'s poorest neighborhoods. Here, women and kids who were beaten and abused are healing, criminals are reforming, addicts are getting free. And it's all without the bloated bureaucratic programs many see as hindering more than helping folks break out of poverty.
The problem with many of the big government programs meant to help the poor is that much of the money actually doesn't go to the poor.
Bob Woodson's Center for Neighborhood Enterprise supports conservative solutions rather than ineffective, wasteful welfare programs.
We've spent about $20 trillion on programs to aid the poor. 70 cents of every one of those dollars goes not to the poor, but those who serve poor people.
Critics say that's created a massive self-perpetuating bureaucracy some call the poverty industrial complex. Its only way to survive is maintaining a huge poor population dependent on government.
So poor people are being injured by the helping hand of government.
House of Help City of Hope's Bishop Shirley Holloway has spent decades, one by one, arming some of society's most hopeless people to become successful and productive. She says what they need is up-close love and relationship.
Big government uses systems. Systems don't work for people. Relationship does. And that's what we believe in, relationship. One with God, one with yourself, and then one with others.
Such a relationship turned around Donna Moore, who for years sold herself in the back of a van so she could buy drugs she then took in the same van.
I was living in abandoned buildings and abandoned vehicles. I was a prostitute, eating out of trash cans. My life was shipwrecked.
Government programs didn't help her transform.
I didn't get what I needed to stay sober.
But Holloway's ministry gave her tools to beat her addictions.
And not only was I given the tools, I was loved.
Holloway's love, discipline, and teaching helped Georgia Williams escape years of selling and doing drugs while she was working right inside a federal government agency and becoming suicidal.
If it hadn't been for Bishop and this place, I would be dead today.
Holloway says many of the poor dislike Republicans, but also realize what Democrats offer is an eventual dead end.
People are tired of Democrats. You know, you can't give away the whole house.
And they're hungry, like she is, for work and effort to be rewarded.
I believe if you work hard, you should be successful. I believe if you're lazy and you don't want to do nothing, you should still eat, but you should not reap the fruit of the land. Right now, we're giving stuff away, you know, and so people think I can just stay at home, make babies, or stay at home and do nothing, and they'll take care of me.
Arthur Brooks celebrates in his book, The Conservative Heart, real and lasting solutions to poverty that have already proved wildly successful.
Since 1970, the percentage of the world's population living on $1 a day or less, starvation level, has decreased by 80%.
He says the Republicans need to support whatever will give poor people the dignity of work and self-sufficiency.
And we have to design policies that don't maintain people in poverty and keep them at the edge, basically, of subsistence, but gives them an authentic opportunity to build their lives through work. We've done it before with welfare reform. We've weakened those reforms during the Obama administration. It's time to bring them back, and it's time for Republican politicians to be the true warriors for the poor that the poor deserve and that our hearts demand.
What these advocates say is that if you give people a real hand up out of poverty, give them their freedom and their dignity, what you may get is their vote. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the House of Help, City of Hope, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. Well, if you want to lose weight, drink a couple glasses of water before you eat. Researchers found that people who drank about 16 ounces of water a half hour before all their meals lost about 9 pounds more over the course of 3 months than those who didn't. A study from the British University was published in the journal Obesity. The idea is that water could help fill you up so you eat less. Plus, water itself is healthy for you anyway. Pat, how much water do you get in a day?
Well, I don't get 16 ounces, but I drink a lot of water. I think water's good for you, but I don't think we have to drink 8 ounces a day. I drink this, that, and the other. But drinking water before you eat is good, and I like to drink a lot of water when I wake up. That's the time when I'm dehydrated the most.
Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah,
Everybody's going around with their water bottles
That's
these
right.
days.